The air is filled with death. The hope of the land has dwindled, and only pain remains when the wind blows. This 1986 animated feature may appear charming, but the very real nightmare fuel contained within still lingers. Let's talk about it, where as per all Nightmare Fuel episodes, there will be major spoilers ahead. When the Wind Blows was originally a graphic novel by Raymond Briggs, and was released in 1982, while the tensions of the Cold War still loomed rife in the atmosphere. The potency of the novel was enough to justify an animated adaptation directed by Jimmy Murakami, but for those believing they were tuning into a little pleasant cartoon about an elderly couple, this was just shy of an hour and a half that they wouldn't be forgetting in a hurry. The elderly couple in question here is made up of James and Hilda, Mr. and Mrs. Bloggs. They have a lovely life out in the open English countryside, their quaint cottage surrounded by luscious green pastures, the perfect retirement place to see out their final years together with their hearts still entwined. They're beautifully affectionate to one another, with a generationally typical husband and wife bond of Hilda seeing to James's needs. They both have rather blasé attitudes to life, including the upcoming threat on the horizon. This is due to word spreading that war is imminent, with newspaper and radio reports discussing how the Soviet Union may be only days away from springing a nuclear attack on the UK. James doesn't fully understand the ins and outs of what is being discussed, but he knows it doesn't sound good. However, the real strength of When the Wind Blows in terms of its storytelling is how it plays up to commonplace Great British ignorance. It's the keep calm and carry on mentality of James and Hilda which greatly downplay the severity of the danger heading for them, and it makes the film in general an educational piece for people. These kind of things need taking seriously because they are serious. I personally think this heightens the horror of the film, due to the Bloggs couple being caught up in a situation that is beyond their comprehension, yet it's a situation that has been precision engineered for devastation. The reason James and Hilda have such a nonchalant attitude towards the idea of an oncoming war is due to them both living through the Second World War themselves, and you can tell by the style of animation during their reminiscing of those times that they view those memories through rose-tinted glasses. They're both confident they can survive whatever the upcoming war brings because they've already been through it all, so it's nothing they aren't used to. They feel conditioned. Yet they have never experienced anything like nuclear warfare, which is an entirely different spectrum altogether. Thankfully, James manages to acquire some pamphlets distributed by the government to prepare the British public for the upcoming storm heading their way. These pamphlets are actually lifted straight from a frightening segment of British history: Protect and Survive. Protect and Survive was a real public campaign created and distributed by the British government from 1974 until 1980, where a combination of pamphlets, radio broadcasts, short films and newspaper articles were put in place to educate the country on how to prepare themselves for a nuclear attack. In effect, how to protect themselves and survive a nuclear strike. James has such pamphlets in the film, and it's his reading and emulating of its rules, while also trying to educate his dear wife, that make for compelling viewing. It's remarkably eye-opening to me as someone who wasn't alive during this time period, though have many relatives who were. The thought of having this constant threat living in the back of your mind on a daily basis, where any intensifying of international relations could lead to utter destruction, is a dreadful contemplation, especially when we learn some of the measures that had to be made. James and Hilda review the guidelines and prepare their house for a bomb strike. This includes having to remove doors from their hinges and lean them against the wall, forming a shelter, before placing cushions against the doors for additional protection. It's this small, crammed, dark space which will be your home for 2 weeks. You must only stay within that space, as leaving it can be dangerous. You need to prepare it with everything you need. Food and other essentials need to be crammed in with you, and there's a mind-blowingly long checklist of things that should also be gathered in advance. The idea of you and another person spending time in this tight crammed space for a fortnight is an uncomfortable thought to begin with, let alone it being in the wake of a nuclear attack. But the film doesn't shy away from pivotal questions, including how going to the toilet will work, or how you're meant to wash your hands or plates after use, which here is suggested by using a box of sand. Just as the blogs have kinda got stuff in place, an announcement is made. It's only 3 minutes until the strike. Imagine going from a fairly regular day, you're just going about your usual routine, until the chaotic eruption of the country is only 3 minutes away. Even then, Hilda continues on, set in her ways, as she hurriedly wants to get the washing off the line. This moment tells you the calibre of people we are witnessing here, more bothered about their clothes than their survival. Thankfully, they do manage to get into their shelter on time before the bomb strikes. It hits with a white flash, turning the world sepia as the force of the blast topples the landscape, with buildings and vehicles and animals being blown away. Despite being animated, I truly felt the impact of the blast here in a way that was extremely effective, in the same vein as Threads. Yet other than a few shots of the surrounding area, all we see is this one house and these 2 people, so your mind's eye fills in the blanks of what this blast has done across an entire nation in even more populated places. Think of what this bomb has done to the major cities, to people who weren't in their shelters at the time of the blast, from the elderly to babies. When the wind blows doesn't need to show you the entire radius of the impact, just this small portion, and then your imagination does the rest. Thankfully, James and Hilda survive the blast with their house intact, a miraculously lucky outcome for them both. Yet what is their near immediate reaction? They hope that the cushions aren't spoiled. They have just survived a nuclear blast, miraculously, yet are more concerned about the condition of their cushions. Madness! Their cushions might not have been spoiled, however, James and Hilda aren't in mint condition themselves. So begins their downfall, caused by the invisible, the hiding decay within the nuclear winds. James and Hilda begin to ache, feeling tired and exhausted, all hot and shivery, suffering from sickness and diarrhea. The blast may be over, but the aftermath is ready and waiting to break down the blogs. Rather idiotically, they both emerge from the shelter long before their recommended 2-week curfew, which they don't realise is exposing them to the nuclear fallout. It's only a matter of time for them now, with the longer they spend in the open leading to faster deterioration. They both walk outside the house, where the gorgeous countryside seen before is now blackened with cloudy grey skies. Yet this visual is pushed even further as a glass bottle can be seen melting. If the fallout is enough to melt glass, imagine what that energy is doing to the already elderly bodies of the blogs. The sadness of the film simply comes down to the blissful ignorance of James and Hilda, because these old dogs can't learn new tricks, yet it's that which leads to them exposing themselves to their fates. James always has an answer for everything. Any observation is met with a "that's what it is" reaction from him, trying to draw upon his knowledge and experience to reassure his beloved wife, when in reality his thoughts are just comforting excuses for what he and Hilda are enduring. And also, the nuclear warfare is an advancement to what James has already been used to. His wisdom and experience he's using to reassure Hilda is from a much different kind of warfare. This is a different beast. However, the ignorance continues through not just James's opinions, but his actions. It begins to rain, so James puts out pots to catch it in order to make cups of tea, aiming to drink nuclear rain without properly considering any consequences. It's only at the last minute where the suggestion of boiling the water to get any potential bad stuff out is made. James then recalls what happened in Japan, referring to Hiroshima and Nagasaki's nuclear bombings. James can remember that people died a while after the bombings, but can't remember why or what happened to them. History has a strange way of repeating itself, yet James doesn't learn from it, expecting that repetition to come in the form of his delightful experience from the war happening again. The final act of the film puts James and Hilda, this otherwise cute and lovable couple, through their paces. What we see proves that nuclear attacks do not choose their victims by their character. Nobody is exempt from the breakdown. They mentally break down, become agitated discussing the concept of megadeath and overkill attacks, and most disturbingly of all, they begin to break down physically. James mistakes Hilda for wearing lipstick. Her lips are actually red from her gums bleeding, as she admits to also bleeding while going to the toilet. Hilda's hair also begins to fall out, and James's vision begins to blur. They both climb into paper bags, advised by the Protect and Survive program, and climb back into their shelter, praying that they will be alright. However, from all the hallmarks we have witnessed, we know their fate. You don't need to see what ultimately happens to the Bloggs. The changes in their bodies and in the environment are enough. When the Wind Blows is a heartbreaking and unforgiving experience, designed to inform you that no matter what background you have or how much you think you know, nuclear warfare is the end game. Even if you are lucky enough to survive the blast, there's a whole other wave coming right after you, something which isn't provided by another detonator or by a visible presence. Instead, it's in the wind you feel and the air you breathe. It's a microscopic war of energies and particles, and it can take your life painfully. That's the nightmare fuel provided by When the Wind Blows, and exactly why it ends up on our Nightmare Fuel Hall of Fame. I'm Connor from Unleash the Ghouls, and we shall see you next time for another dose of Nightmare Fuel. Thanks for watching this video. Cheers.